Hi, welcome to Creepy Culture. This is Jen, and tonight we have Mike from California coming on to tell his encounter about a UFO, and this happened in 1985. So, hello, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
You can just go ahead and just start from the beginning and go ahead
Oh,
and tell your
okay.
encounter.
All right. Very well. So, my first UFO incident occurred in 1985 in South Hayward, California, and I was living um, on a street called East 11th Street, and it was just supposed to be a random walk around the block. Um, I was living at 28063 East 11th Street, which was directly across the street from 28080 East 11th Street, which was my childhood home that we had for a couple of years before my mom ended up having to sell. It was my grandfather's house. When he passed away, we were able to move into that house for a couple of years until we had to sell it. And then when we sold it, we ended up moving in with the neighbors. It was a Mexican family, the Lopez family, that lived directly across the street from us. So we kind of temporarily lived with them until we found another place to live. So it started off, it was one night in 1985. I remember literally walking out the screen door of 28063 East 11th Street, and I walked straight out and met my friend Chano. He just happened to be walking, down the middle of the street, and we stopped in literally in the middle of the street, and there wasn't much conversation between me and my friend Chano. There was just more of like an understanding, like, we're gonna go take a walk around the block. Now, reflecting on that moment now as an adult, it's a little eerie now because I realized that there wasn't much conversation. It was almost like it was all planned. So, it was all like divinely planned for us to meet up right in the middle of the street and take our little cute walk around the block. But this is how it went. I ran into my friend Chano in the middle of the street. We were both under the impression that it was time for a walk around the block, and that's what we did. We just started walking. And it was probably about, I don't know, 7:30, maybe 8:30. It was just beginning to get dark. And I know that it was summertime, the very beginning of summer. I really looked forward to going to junior high school the following year. And so Chano and I just started walking, and like I said, it just got dark, but the clouds were still out. So before we even made our little first hairpin turn of the block, I was taking a lot of notice of the clouds because it was really pretty. The clouds were really bright, white, and they were low, and they were moving pretty fast. And so there was nothing out of the ordinary so far. I knew, even at 12 years old that, that's why the clouds appeared really fast to me because they were low. And I'm sure that the moon was probably lighting up those clouds and making them look pretty and white. And like I said, before we even got to the very first hairpin turn of this block, I was taking a major notice of the clouds. And we weren't doing much talking, me and my friend Chano. He was walking on my left-hand side, and we remained pretty much in the street. We weren't on the sidewalk. We were mostly in the street, and we're walking, and I'm looking up at the beautiful clouds, and I noticed that there was a particular part of the clouds that began to look like it was beginning to swirl. And I had a couple of thoughts that ran through my mind before I actually blacked out. And these thoughts were, wow, it looks like that cloud is beginning to swirl. And then my next thought was, oh my God, it is swirling, and it's swirling fast, and I'm gone, Jennifer. Jen, I'm gone. I literally blacked out. And this is the most confusing part by the way, of my UFO experience. It took me a majority of my life to understand and start to put these pieces of the puzzle together. Um, it's such a misconception when someone says, "Hey, I was abducted by a UFO." A lot of people think that, you're going to have this memory of being sucked up into the tractor beam of the flying saucer, and you're going to be like, "Hey, I'm getting sucked up into the flying saucer," and it didn't work like that. It didn't happen like that at all. um, it all started with me just looking up and going, "Wow, look at the pretty clouds," and oh my God, I think they're starting to swirl, because it was a very small and very slow, kind of a pinwheel, crisp, clean, calculated swirl. It was nothing like a natural phenomenon at all, like a tornado, or we don't get that kind of weather, in the Bay Area in California anyway. But yeah, it was like a really crisp, clean, clock-like swirl that started off very slow and very small, and then it got really big really fast, and I literally just blacked out. Like, I could have died at that very moment, and that would have been my last memory of being alive. You know what I mean? I completely blacked out. And then my very next conscious moment, I was no longer standing. I knew where I was standing. You know what I mean? I was literally right next to the hairpin of the turn. I was still on East 11th Street. And when I came to, I wasn't on East 11th Street anymore, Jen. I was on East 10th Street. I was past the hairpin turn. I was about a half a block further down the road and around the corner. And now I'm standing directly beneath, literally, a flying saucer that, if I could have took off my shoe and threw it, I would have been able to hit it. That's how low this craft was, directly above me and my friend Chano's head. Now, when I came to, I was standing directly underneath this flying saucer, but I was frozen stiff. I could not move. And at 12 years old, I remember thinking to myself, well, maybe I can't move because I'm just so excited, and I don't want to miss a moment of this flying saucer, because I knew what I was looking at right away. Um, I've seen Star Wars and I watched Star Trek. This was 1985, and I knew what that was, and I had a feeling that these things weren't going to, like, just sit around for hours. I knew that it was probably something that was just going to be temporarily, like, maybe under a minute, and that's kind of what it felt like, Jen. Was this whole this whole thing just felt like it probably took maybe under 2 minutes, by the time I blacked out and came to. So I remember standing there like a soldier. My arms were tucked to the side of my body, and my head was fixed up, upward. And here I am looking at the belly of what you would call a typical flying saucer. And I couldn't talk. I mean, reflecting on it now, you would think that I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Chano, look at this! What the heck is this?" And there's a lot of people that are really frightened and have scary experiences. And I didn't feel frightened or scared. Like I said, I felt a little kind of excited, and I chalked up my body not being able to move, to just me being excited, and I just wanted to not miss a second of it. So I didn't think much of how stiff and solid I felt at the moment. But now, of course, I realize that was sleep paralysis. This craft had total control over me. It had control over my thoughts. There was nothing. I remember thinking there was nothing that I could hide in my mind. And I remember thinking also that this craft did not fear me and feel like I was going to do anything. And I knew that there was nothing that I could do, to this craft. And it was almost like a violation, a little bit, because, Jen, I admit I was a dirty little boy. I had really bad personal hygiene, and I remember thinking, how embarrassing. It's weird reflecting on it now.
Mhm.
But I was a dirty little boy, and I remember thinking, maybe I'm not clean enough and ready for this. And and thinking about it now as an adult, like I wonder if these are just some of the thoughts that I had when I was actually on board and they were taking my clothes off and setting me on a table. I don't really know because I don't have all my memory. There's a lot of memory that's locked into my subconscious. But when I'm solid stiff looking at the belly of this craft, it had this blue light that was spontaneously flashing on the belly of this craft, and it kind of just would flash periodically on different sections of the craft, and it was a random blinking blue light that was just kind of going anywhere. I wouldn't know when the next place it was going to flash, and every time that this light would flash on the bottom of this UFO, it would actually illuminate a little portion of the craft a little bit closer to where I could see really like intricate details of the craft. And it looked like wires, like I would see all these like tubular little things. When you look at the craft as a whole, I didn't really notice these things. Only when the light would flash, this blue light would flash, and I would see all this integral tubing and wires, it seemed like, going on. And I remember thinking to myself, man, if this is a UFO, with advanced technology and it's from the future or whatever, to me it just felt like it was having some kind of electrical issue. And I remember thinking, why would it have an electrical issue, because it just seemed sloppy to me the way that this light was bouncing around on the belly of the craft. It just seemed sloppy. So I thought, man, why are they having an electrical issue? And as soon as I thought that, Jen, the saucer just like stopped whatever electrical funk that I thought it was going on having, and it began to put on a beautiful, symmetric, totally balanced, multicolored light show. And it was fascinating because the lights would like start from the perimeter of the craft around the outside of the craft, and they would work their way towards the core of the craft and then back out to the middle. They would go counterclockwise, then they would go clockwise. And what's funny about the multicolored light show that it put on for me and my friend Shano was it started off really slow, just like the vortex in the clouds. It started off really slow, the light show, and then it steadily and surely got faster and faster and faster. Um, and I really think about a lot of the thoughts that were going through my head within that couple of minutes. And one of the thoughts, one of the other weird thoughts I had besides um, how dirty. I remember thinking, maybe I'm not clean enough for this. I was like, why am I thinking that? And then I was like, why am I thinking, how am I going to remember this? Like, what did I mean when I was thinking to myself, how am I going to remember this? But I was referring to the light show, all the different multicolored lights that were blinking on the belly of this craft. They were beautifully symmetric. It was like I remember thinking, "Oh my God, now they're showing off to me. They're letting me know that there's nothing electrically wrong with their technology or their craft. They're kind of giving me an example of look what we can do. I really felt like they were showing off, but all the different colors that I seen, like I'm a little bit colorblind to this day, and it's not really like a colorblind where, it's not safe for me to drive around. How could I distinguish green and red and yellows, traffic lights? Like I can distinguish those kind of colors. I just have a hard time with subtle, like light green, and dark green, like I have an issue. I sometimes I just call it color dumb, not color blind. I think I'm a little bit color dumb. Um, but I swear, Jen, this craft showed me every color that was under the rainbow, maybe even some that were out of the spectrum that we normally see. I just remember, wow, I can't believe how many colors. It was kind of like a canned light, uh, like this craft could have lit up a little light on any section of the belly of this craft that it wanted to, and it decided to put on a really balanced, symmetrical. I really felt like, wow, this is clean, this is balanced. I don't know if it's because I'm a Libra and everything's got to be symmetrical and balanced for me, but that's how I felt. I went from feeling, God, this looks sloppy, to wow, this is crisp, clean, and balanced and beautiful. So I also remember thinking to myself, no one's going to believe this. And, at 12 years old, I had already understood at the very moment that seeing was believing, and I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I was just sitting there with my arms stuck to my side and my head, just stuck looking straight up, witnessing this multicolored light show. There was no other noise going on. I remember thinking, when this thing stops blinking, its little light show, there's people that are going to come swinging off their porches, and me and Chano are going to just like talk about it. And I wasn't thinking along the lines yet, like why are me and Chano not talking about it? Um, I just remember thinking, oh, okay, when this is done, everyone's gonna be like, what the hell was that, right? And all of a sudden, the saucer stopped with its little multicolored light show, and it began to drift ahead of me and Chano a little bit to where now I see the entire craft as a whole. And I'm not just stuck underneath the of it looking up at the belly of the craft. Now I can see the entire ship, and it is indeed what someone would describe, as a flying saucer. It was just a streamlined pancake style like disc. There was nothing really pronounced about the object. It was just smooth, aerodynamic disc. There was no bubble on the top, like a Jetsons cartoon or anything like that.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I can see the entire ship now. It kind of glided ahead of us some ways, and this ship did a little bit of a slight kind of a wobble right before it took off near the speed of light, like somebody shot it out of a gun. It took off so clean and crisp, like someone. The way I used to always describe it, Jen, was if you were in a dark room and you had a flashlight with you, and you took that flashlight and you pointed it at point A, and you went and with a flick of your wrist, you moved that light from point A to point B. It moved like that crisp and clean. You know what I mean? That smooth
Mm-hmm.
and that quiet. So it took off near the speed of light, and after it was out of sight, I was able to move. And the first thing that I did was I looked to my left because that's where Chano was. The last time we were, looking, when I looked up at those clouds and I saw the swirl, I know that Chano was on my left-hand side. And even though we weren't standing in that same spot anymore, now we're like a half a block further down the road and around the corner, we had just passed this park that they just built parallel with the BART train. We have a BART system, Bay Area Rapid Transit train, that was literally parallel with this little park and this sidewalk that they placed us back on was this like curvy little sidewalk. And I remember looking to my left to Chano, and there he was. Sure enough, he was still to my left, and I go, "That was a UFO, huh?" And Chano looked at me and he goes, "Yeah." And I was like, why did he say it like that? Why is he not excited like I am? I can't believe what we just experienced. And I could tell right off the way he said it, just the way he went, yeah. I was like, what the heck? For some reason, Jen, Chano was not impressed by this experience. And, yeah, he acknowledged what we just seen. So there was an instant validation there, but I couldn't get over why he answered me like, yeah, like he didn't care, like what the heck? So there's all kinds of, things that I could think of now, after studying the phenomenon for like 40 years. This is very typical. I know that now. There's a lot of uncomfortable, quiet, long rides home, when people have experiences like this, and they're with like a friend, or with somebody else. But it was a really quiet rest of the way, around the block. So I'm just describing to you right now, just literally a walk around the block. So we just started walking, like, okay, we're just heading back home here now. And I could just tell that he didn't want to talk about it. So we didn't, it's so weird, we just had this experience, but I just felt like it was taboo to even talk about it. Um, when we rounded the final turn, the final little hairpin turn that completes the walk around the block, I see Chano's older brother Peter, standing in front of Chano's house with a couple of his older friends. They're talking, so I decided to try to talk about it with somebody right away.
Right.
I was excited. I wanted to share my experience. And even though Chano turned me down, and that was kind of an odd situation, I was like, well, let's try somebody else then. And so we get up closer to Chano's older brother Peter and his friends, and I go, "Hey guys, we just seen a UFO." And one of the kids goes, "Yeah, me too, and it went that way." And I remember thinking like, "Oh wow, he's pointing the direction that this UFO took off. It went east towards the Hayward Hills." And I was like, wow, he's seen it. And it was just, it hadn't been a few seconds, and I realized just by the look on all their faces that they were just kidding around. Um, they were just messing with me. And even at 12 years old, like I said, I understood that seeing was believing, and this was going to be hard for anybody to actually believe, unless you were like literally right there with us. And it was kind of a disappointment. And well, I'm not gonna lie, it was a major disappointment. And I just kind of put my head down, and they were just kind of giggling a little bit. It wasn't a big deal. It's not like that they sat there and they were like, ah. I look at Chano, and you could just still tell that he didn't want to say anything about it. And
Mhm.
I just ended up walking right back into the Lopez family's house at 28063, and by myself. Chano and I split. Chano ended up going in his house right there, and I ended up going into the Lopez family's house. And I can't remember exactly who was in the house, but I remember, trying to tell my story when I got inside the house, and um, no one really, I could just tell that no one really believed me. I was a bit of a class clown in school, and we had just graduated elementary school, and I remember in the cute little yearbook that they created for us. I remember them saying, Mike's funny, likes to tell jokes, and my first year in junior high school, I literally was a class clown. Mike's the class clown. So it was hard for me to get people to take me serious, because I'm going ahead and I'm flash forwarding, that whole summer. I'm flash forwarding because that was in the beginning of the summer, and summer's over. I'm not talking much about it because no one really believes me. Even my mom, my mom kind of gives me that whole, I believe that's what you believe you saw, son, type of deal. She's not really shooting me down. Um, not very many people are believing me. So junior high school starts, and I'm telling everybody and their mother about my UFO experience. And like I said, I'm a class clown, and no one's really taking me serious. So I would track down Chano, and because he was more of a serious, kind of played football, and you know I would track Chano down with a couple of friends behind me, and I would say, Chano, can you let these guys know that, about our experience? And Chano would say stuff like, "Man, Mike, you're still talking about that?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm still talking about this. I have a feeling I'm going to be talking about this the rest of my life.
it was like trying to squeeze juice out of a fruit, and I'm just like, can you at least give these guys an answer, a yes or a no, because I did all the explaining about the light show. But Jen, I don't remember talking about that vortex in the clouds with people. That was the most confusing part. Like I told you earlier, I kind of left that part of the story out when I would tell my story. And get this, it's funny. The reason why I would keep out the vortex in the clouds is because I always thought that it would discredit my UFO story.
Hmm.
I didn't want to talk about the vortex in the clouds. Nobody's heard of a vortex in the clouds that makes you black out, right? I never really thought about that. I just wanted to talk about the UFO that I was standing underneath with the multicolored light show, and how it took off near the speed of light. So I would just stick to the UFO portion of my story, and China would just be like, "Yeah, like it happened." And we'd all kind of split up. And to me, it wasn't much of the validation that I was really looking forward to. You would think how lucky, you would be to witness something so amazing and to actually have a friend with you that can validate this. So you don't think you're crazy. You don't go your half your life thinking you're crazy. So I didn't feel like I was going crazy. It was real. It happened. I had my little validation with Chano, but I got to a point in life where I left Chano alone. I just let him go because, I never really dug really deep with the questions. I was only 12 years old. I didn't ask him the right questions. I felt like I was just squeezing enough information just to validate that we seen this thing, but we never talked about how we felt. We never talked about, how I felt like I couldn't move, why we weren't talking about it, why we weren't pointing at it, why we weren't afraid or running. How come the neighbors weren't swinging off their porch like, "Hey boys, did you see that?" Nothing like that happened. It was like nobody's seen it. It's such a misconception to think that you have to go up to the mountaintops or to a desert somewhere, Area 51, to witness a UFO. And that's not the case. It's a huge misconception. This is just a regular neighborhood, and with houses right next to the next house. Like I said, there was a little Bay Area rapid transit train that went parallel with East 10th Street that we were on. So this all happened on East 10th and East 11th. We started on East 11th, and when I blacked out, I was on East 10th, and then we completed our block. I was back on East 11th again. I went in the house. I told everybody in junior high school. I ended up saying I'm just going to leave Chano alone. Um, and and I left it alone, Jen, for years because I think I got jaded. I got jaded of telling my story and people just kind of rolling their eyes. And but there was, no matter what happened, even though I kind of just melted back into the social programming of everything, because it was just much easier to just not talk about it. Even though I stopped talking about it for quite a gap of my life, I would always remember and think to myself, wow, I can't believe that happened. That was such a neat thing, and I still do that to this day whenever I get depressed or, I'm tired at work or, whatever. I always reflect on that moment just to remind myself, like, wow, there is more to life than just, morning Ralph, morning Sam, and there's something really neat. And I felt like it was a privilege to have experienced this. Um, and if you don't mind, I would like to present to you. Um, I would like to go back in time a little bit because I realized something at some point in my life uh, when I started thinking and talking about my UFO experience again. I realized something, Jen. I had experienced something 2 years prior to 1985. I was 10 years old,
Mhm.
and I was still in Hayward, California. We kind of lived all over the Bay Area, but this was near a high school called Sunset High School in Hayward, California. real quick, I'm going to let you know that I woke up in the middle of the night one night and I'm sitting in my bed and I look on the floor of my bedroom, and this is going to sound probably crazier than a UFO, but I'm just going to tell you there was a 4 foot waitress. She was wearing 1950s waitress attire, and she was walking towards me. And it was more than a waitress. It was actually um, it was a vision of a little diner, and she was, just part of the diner. This waitress was walking towards me. She had a plate of food. Um, she had customers sitting on each side of her in their little booths. So she was just walking down an aisle of a diner, 1950s diner. At 10 years old, I remember thinking like, I know what 1950s, male kiss my grits, kind of,
Right.
I don't know if there's an old show called Alice. I just dated myself, I'm 52 years old now, but there used to be this old show called Alice, and she was a waitress, and it's kind of old school, and I just knew that waitresses don't really, they don't dress like that anymore unless you go to like a retro diner or something, right?
Hmm.
This was a 1950s waitress, and she was walking towards me. She had a plate of food, and like I said, it was a busy diner, and it took up probably like 1/3 of my bedroom. This vision that I had, I was not dreaming. This was very lucid. I was very awake. Um, she was coming towards me, and one more detail about this 1950s waitress. She was made of like that old school television snow. Everything was like static. Everything was like that, that old school, like, poltergeist, they're here, it was like a snowy, staticky media that she seemed to be made up of. And but very detailed. I mean, very, very detailed. It was obvious that she was a waitress. It was obvious that she was wearing 1950s attire. It was obvious that she was in a diner walking towards me. I can hear the multi conversations of a busy diner, the mumbling of people talking, the whole I can hear the silverware hitting the plates. It was a All the audio was provided for me. I can hear everything that you would hear in a busy 1950s diner, and she was walking towards me as I sat there in my bed, and I wasn't extremely like totally scared. I was a little worried about it, but it wasn't like I wanted to, just like run out of my skin or anything like that. But it was enough for me to call out to my mom down the short hallway, and I said, "Mom, can I come sleep with you?" And I remember hearing my mom's voice say, "Sure, honey, come on." So I remember thinking, okay, I got permission to go sleep with my mom. So, but I now I have a major decision to make, because if I get off my bed, I'm going to end up having to walk through this mess that I'm looking at, and I was afraid to walk through it. Um, so I thought to myself, I'm af I'm afraid to step on this lady. So I told my mom, I go, but mom, I'm afraid to step on this lady. And that was the last thing I said before, guess what? I blacked out. I blacked out, and it took me a long time to realize, Michael, you've blacked out. Just like you blacked out with the clouds swirling. You know what I mean? It took me a while to put this major puzzle piece together and to realize that these beings, um, they can approach you and appear to you any which way they want. You know what I mean? And I learned of things called like screen memories. That's something that I learned, where they can appear to you any way they want, especially as children, just to whatever, to get you to not be as terrified. Maybe it's just something that they do. It's a task that they do to get their job done. Whatever they need to do, they take you, they put you on the table. The whole, examination thing. Not that I have that memory of being laid on a table and being examined like a lot of other experiencers. Um, but there's a point where I blacked out. And, it's not like I came to the next morning and was like, "Whoa, what happened, last night with that waitress? Hey mom, do you remember me saying, hey, can I sleep with you?" And there was no conversation about that night until I was much older, until I actually became brave enough to start talking about this experience and starting to put the pieces together. Then I started, talking to my mom. Hey mom, do you remember that night that I woke up? And it was just kind of hard getting a true validation from her so many years later down the road. You know what I mean, Jen?
Yeah.
So, and plus, my mom was a bartender. Everybody knew my mom. Everyone knew my mom, Judai. They called her Judai. She was a bartender at many different bars. I could probably name off every bar that was in that town of Hayward by the time I was 6 years old.
Hmm.
Everybody knew my mom, and the drinks were lined up for her when it was time for her to get off work. You know what I mean? And uh, put it this way, it was hard to get a clear validation from her, other than she says she remembers me, you know, uh, asking if I can sleep with her that night. But there was no memory of me actually walking down that little short hallway and hopping into her bed. So, to tell you the truth, I really believe that they had taken me that night as well. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
they they took me when I was 10. They took me when I was 12. More than likely, they have been taking me my entire life. And these are the only two memories that I have that I can truly, honestly tell you, at sitting in my skin now at 52 years old. It's only been like the last 5 years that I've completely come out of the closet and just started calling it what it is.
Right.
Abduction, being taken, whatever. Okay, it wasn't a terrifying experience for me. I understand that people do have terrified experiences, but I just chalk it up to kind of the same thing we do with animals. We keep track of certain animals and we tag them, and it's for their own benefit. We're not evil monsters, although us humans kind of do some evilish, monsterish things. Um, I understand that animals are like terrified, thinking we're going to kill them when we're not. We're just trying to, keep track of their species, and sometimes we put them out so we don't have to. It just makes our job easier. So it just makes me think that there's a species that's higher advanced than us, and they kind of do the same thing with us, and sometimes they don't want to deal with the kicking and the screaming, and sometimes that might work against whatever task that they're trying to do to us, and sometimes it's easier to just put us out or put us into some kind of Oz effect, you know and a lot of the memories that just get locked into your subconscious. And to this day I still have not been regressively hypnotized, but I do plan on doing that at some point. um but you know I've been with my wife forever. I met her when she was 17. I was 19. She always knew that I was a UFO kid. I had an experience with the UFO. I'm really into UFOs. But for me to suggest that I was taken was a little too much for her, and I could see it in her eyes that she really didn't believe me. She thought that I had way too much time on my hands to think about this, and that I pretty much just kind of made up this story to make it sound more entertaining and cool. I don't know, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so it really kind of broke my heart, and you know,
Aw.
I just felt like, if I'm going to continue to be married to you and spend my life with you, and I can't even share the most passionate thing that I want to share with you, and for you to roll your eyes and not believe me, really broke my heart. So what I did was I just prayed. I'm not a really, really religious person. I've always reserved a space in my heart for God, but I didn't know who this God was. And I didn't believe like every church the way they depicted things. I knew that there was something off with religion, but I knew that I should save a part of my heart for God. So what I did was, though, you can call it a prayer, you can call it just putting it out in the cosmos, putting the, I know now that thoughts are very powerful, and I just put it out there, and I prayed that maybe one day I would have an experience with my wife, and it would really help, and well, my final UFO experience happened July 21st, 2022 at 9:15 p.m. in San Leandro, California. So this was just a few years ago, Jen. I had my final UFO experience, and this time, guess what? It was with my wife. I prayed for it, and I got it. And I was smoking cigarettes at the time. It was a nasty habit, but me and my wife went outside to have a cigarette in San Leandro, California, which is one town over from Hayward, California. I haven't moved far from uh, my childhood little neighborhood. We went outside for a cigarette, and all of a sudden, here comes this weird object, coming from the right hand side, and it's coming towards us overhead. And I didn't want to embarrass myself, which I've done before with Mylar balloons. I've embarrassed myself before with drones. But even with drones and Mylar balloons, like sometimes it might take a few seconds or a minute even, but I would realize like, oh gosh, it's just a Mylar balloon that I'm seeing, or like, oh my God, you just made my heart jump. Like that's just a drone, and I got really familiar with the drones that people have in the area, and they can only do so much, right? And they go up, they go down, they go left, they go right. They might flash a green light, they might flash a red light, and you keep an eye on them, and they end up going back down to their owners. They never go, like too far out of range. And I didn't want to embarrass myself, so I go, huh, what kind of drone is that? Even though I knew that this was a special object coming on overhead. I just couldn't lay my eyes on it though, because I didn't know if it was flipping. I couldn't tell if it was rolling. I didn't know if it was rotating. There was a point, Jen, where I thought, is this thing shape shifting? Because it wasn't your typical saucer. It was really weird. And, this last and final experience that I'm describing to you, it didn't involve missing time. I don't believe we were abducted. Um, it was just this object that me and my wife were keeping our eye on, and when it got directly above us overhead, um, there was this ring. I remember this. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I remember this ring. There was like a ring, like Saturn. It was like a ring around Saturn that was spinning. I just remember a ring, and this craft was like a ring, and it was spinning. It was like rotating, not spinning. It was like rotating. And as this object got overhead, I remember looking up at this ring that was rotating, and it kind of stopped its rotating just enough to illuminate this pattern of lights to me. And I remember thinking, what's the message here? What's the message? And this brilliant, bright white set of lights came on from within inside this ring. And I'll describe it to you as best I can. It was four white dots of light with a line. So it was dot 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 and and a line next to it, and then it was dot 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 a line, and then another four dots and a line. To me, it looked a lot like Morse code. I call it s'mores code sometimes on accident. So, but yeah, to me it looked like Morse code, and so anyway, when it was directly above me, it gave me this illuminated this brilliant white pattern of lights that looked like Morse code, and I just kind of put that in my back pocket, in my memory, and as it flew over my head and past me, I remember thinking, well, let me pull out my phone, and to me, it wasn't like I was trying to get this like major evidence. I knew it wasn't going to be, because by this time it was already kind of like already past me and moving on. It wasn't like the fastest object in the world, um, but but like I said, I didn't know if it was rolling, flipping, but yeah, it was. This ring was rotating, and it just kind of kept pimping on down the road, in the sky. And so I pulled out my phone basically just to kind of get the license plate of that car that just hit me. You know what I mean? I just wanted some kind of memory to look at. I knew it wasn't going to be this mind boggling, earth shattering, UFO evidence. And it wasn't either, Jen. I mean, I still have this video and it looks just like any other light in the sky that, somebody goes, "Hey, look at this UFO," and you're looking at it and you're like, "Okay, I see the light in the sky that you're talking about." But, I'm not there with you. So it's hard. You know what I mean? It's really tough for me I'm such a skeptic. Like, I need to be there. I need to experience it. And this video is not very impressive. It impresses the heck out of me because I know what it is, but I know it's something special.
Right.
But anyway, I can hear my wife say, "Well, that ain't no drone," you know, and it took a second, but when we went upstairs, from that experience, we were kind of just talking about it, and she goes, "Wow, that kind of reminded me of Saturn." I go, "What do you mean it reminded you of Saturn?" And she goes, "Well, it had that ring," and that's all she said. And I was like, "Oh my God, that's right." And it really reminded me of the wheel within the wheel, because there were some visions that I had soon after my 1985 UFO experience. Here I am, 12 years old, and I'm having these visions. I'm having these visions of a wheel within the wheel. And I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with, Ezekiel's vision of God, but I learned about it really quick because there were some things that triggered me. There was like a movie that I saw that was called Contact with Jodie Foster, and
Mm-hmm.
there was this wheel within the wheel type of object. I remember getting triggered when I watched this movie, and this was all when I stopped talking about it for a while, when I just kind of took a break from telling everybody about my UFO experience. I seen this movie Contact. It triggered me. It made me start wondering what was that wheel within the wheel that I kind of had a vision of soon after my UFO experience. And then I look into the whole Ezekiel's vision of God, because now there's television shows called Ancient Aliens, and they're talking about Ezekiel's vision of God and how, in ufology, there's this argument about, what he had witnessed. You've got the whole spiritual, religious aspect of it, where, Ezekiel thinks he's seen the vision of God. And then you've got the whole, like, hey, it sounds like to me he had a UFO experience. And then, you try to start mixing and meshing the whole UFOs and aliens with spirituality and religion, and you get a lot of people that don't appreciate that, right? But that's what's on my plate this time around, and that's what I experienced. So I started really studying Ezekiel and his vision of God, and I learned of the hierarchy of angels. You've got your Ophanim, the wheel within the wheel. I believe we call it many things, but there's a lot of people that are not familiar with it. I sure in the heck wasn't familiar with it, with the Ophanim, the wheel within the wheel, and I sure don't think that a 12-year-old had any business knowing what that was or seeing, what that was. But I did. At 12 years old, I seen this, and I know it had something to do with the UFO, because when I had this vision, I remember thinking, well, this is no UFO, but it's floating, and it's not like the UFO that I've seen, but it is hovering and spinning above my old childhood home that I described to you on 28080 East 11th Street. Because I forgot to mention to you that I did have some visions after that 1985 UFO experience, and one of the visions was me standing out in the driveway looking at this wheel within the wheel, floating and rotating above of my childhood home. And so that's what really reminded me of this object that I had prayed to see with my wife, and we seen it, July 21st, 2022 at 9:15 p.m. We witnessed something that I would describe to you as uh, the wheel within the wheel. I mean, that's what it looked like. All I could remember was the ring of it. And I tell you what, I've done a couple of UFO conferences. I've reported a couple of UFO reports to MUFON, and my wife all of a sudden, went from not not wanting to talk about this stuff, not really wanting to be open-minded about it. And she saw me making my final report about this craft that we witnessed together, and she just started pitching in with me. She started helping me. She's like, "Go get a pen and paper." And we're she describes the ring just as well as I did, but she described more of the craft that was in the center of this ring, which was like a egg-shaped craft that was rolling from right to left as the ring around it was flipping from back to forward, kind of a back and forward motion, and both objects were like the same object but independent from each other. They weren't attached to each other. So that's why when I seen it flying above me, I couldn't really lay a good eye on it. That's why I couldn't tell if it was rolling, flipping, rotating. That's why I was like, is it shape shifting? Like, I just didn't get it. The only thing that I could really describe was the ring around it. And and it's weird because it wasn't a ring within a ring. It wasn't a wheel within a wheel. There was a ring, but it was hovering around an egg-shaped craft. And so that's what kind of craft that we've seen in 2022. And here we are now. And boy, I'm out of breath. I'm sorry about that. I didn't really give you a break to ask any questions, but I'm sure you have one or two for me
I
at
do.
this point. Yeah, okay.
I do got some questions, and thank you so much for telling that. That's
Sure.
really
I
great, and
love it.
I love the part about your wife getting in on it. That's great.
Yeah, because now she's on board. I mean, she's not going to go join my UFO group that I have on Facebook that I created like 7 or 8 years ago. She's not going to go join that group, and I'd still be uncomfortable if she did. You know what I mean? Like, and she's not going to go join ufology, or she's not going to go join MUFON or anything like that. But it's something that we can have a conversation about. And as long as I make space for quality family time, it's okay for me to play, and have these, interviews. I speak at UFO conferences in the Bay Area. It's okay for me to go and play, so to speak. You know what I mean? I love doing this. This is my passion. It's very therapeutic to talk about my experiences.
Mhm.
I'm still learning. I'm not a know-it-all. Everyone hates a know-it-all. I'm not a know-it-all. I'm very open-minded. I don't expect to learn everything about this phenomenon in this one lifetime. It might take a few lifetimes. I don't know, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and let you ask some questions that you may have.
Okay, my first question is, when you and Chano, um, like, when that happened on 10th and 11th Street there, did did you know how much time loss you had?
No, but you know what? For some reason, I've always thought that I felt like that I lost maybe an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. I don't know how I can even fathom how much time I lost, because like I told you, it felt like a total of 2 minutes. From the point of me seeing the vortex in the clouds to me being displaced about a half a block further down the road, standing beneath the belly of the craft. Um, and it put on the multi-light show and it took off, and then I was able to move again. We finished walking around the block. That, I swear, that felt like just 2 minutes, but for some reason, and I didn't have anybody sitting in the house, and nobody in the Lopez family. My mom was a bartender. She was at work, so she was never there. She was never home, so I had nobody to answer to. When I came home, there was nobody that was like, "Where have you been?" You know what I mean?
Right.
It had just turned dark, like I told you, when I stepped out that screen door. Uh, and you know what? It was still dark when I was done. So it wasn't like I had this feeling. And there was people. I know that there was at least one or two people that were awake and and moving around, when I went into the house, because I remember trying to tell a couple people. I don't know if it was Ellie Lopez. I don't know if it was Bob, her husband Lopez. I don't know if it was Mike, Greg, or Robert, one of the older boys that lived there along with us. But there was nobody that was, like, where the heck you've been? I had no curfew or anything like that. It didn't seem like I lost like a major amount of time, but it did for some reason. I want to, and I trust myself. That's what I've learned to do, is trust my gut. and I'm gonna go with it. And for some reason, I just feel like it was more. It was like an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes at the most.
Okay, that's what I was wondering if you had lost time. And then I was going to ask you about hypnosis, but you answered that already and said that you were still thinking about doing that.
Right.
And I have, see, this kind of happened to me too, where there was a ship very low, and mine was in the daytime, and nobody else saw it. And I was wondering, nobody ever said anything to you about they saw it too, just you and Chano, right?
Right. Yeah. They
Mhm.
dictate to me. I could totally tell that they dictate who sees and experiences what. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
Wow.
nobody saw mine either, just me and my best friend. And luckily, we are still best friends, and um, she acknowledges it,
Wow.
and we still talk about it all the time because it's traumatizing, to
Wow.
say the least. So yeah, we're the only ones that saw this big, huge.
And there was other people, like you said, it was during the day, and you remember there was other people around. You could see that, right? Yeah.
It was across the street from a whole housing community, and
Oh,
kids were outside playing and everything, and nobody saw it but me and her. And we lost 2 hours. Like we don't even remember losing 2 hours. All we remember is looking up a tree and this cigar-shaped gray thing was up there.
oh,
We don't remember anything, like, we were, like,
yeah.
getting yelled at, like, "Where you guys been?" And we're like, "What?" So we don't recall any of it except seeing that, so
See, that I swear that's what leads me to believe that this happens to way more people than we think,
Mhm,
because what we do, as humans, we just chalk a lot of things up, you could just be walking on a beach and looking at a little pool of water, and get memorized and hypnotized just looking at the little pond of water,
mhm.
and before you know it, you've lost 2 hours, and you're like, wow, what happened? Obviously I lost 2 hours. All I was doing was staring at this little. I think it can happen just like that, you know?
It did happen just like that, and it does, and, yeah, that's why I was asking if anybody else saw the same thing you did, any of the neighbors or anything, because nobody saw what we saw in broad daylight. Nobody.
No. Yeah.
Nobody. Not the kids playing outside, not the adults sitting in their yards, not nobody. Nobody
Yeah.
saw it
It
but
was
us.
meant just for us.
Yeah,
It really was. These things are so powerful and they're so highly advanced. They control every aspect of the experience.
and
It's amazing.
did you say you were in the ship? Do you remember being in it?
So I have naturally surfaced memories. I had a really really weird dream that kind of repeated itself like 2 or 3 nights in a row. I remember having the same dream where I would wake up in the same spot, and I can only describe this place as being on board the UFO. So I
Okay.
have naturally surfaced memories of a few sections of the craft. If you'd like me to take a minute, it won't take as long, I promise. If you'd like
Oh,
me to
you're fine.
describe,
Go ahead.
okay, I'll describe a small portion of the ship that I became pretty familiar with. I kept waking up in this long, white, windy hallway with doors to my right. I would always start off I would wake up in the same part of this hallway. I swear it was 2 or 3 nights in a row, and I would wake up in this part of the hallway, and there's doors to my right, and they're evenly spaced doors, and they're just regular doors that you and I, know that have in our home or whatever.
Right.
And it's a really white, it's either white or just bright hallways, and they're turned to the right. Everything's moving to the right, and I open up these doors, and when I open up the door, I'm surprised at what I see on the other side of the door because there's a humongous, gigantic room. It's more than a room, Jen. It's what I would describe as an amphitheater type of setting with a stage, with seating. I walk into this huge room and I stand up on the stage. I'm by myself, yet I feel like I'm being guided. It's like a tour. I'm on a tour, and someone's showing off this place to me. and I'm on the stage looking at what I would feel like what looks to be like the seating, but it's not the seating that you and I would enjoy at a baseball game. It's like melted black. Everything's everything's bright or white in this amphitheater room, okay? The stage, as far as the eyes can see, there's I don't see a ceiling. I don't remember. I just remember everything was bright or the color white. But when I look into what I thought was the seating area, the seats weren't really seats. They were like, to me, it looked like melted obsidian. It was like this black abstract shaped thing going on. I still don't know what it was, of course. But it was weird. It was like, why is this the only area that's like kind of it's like black, you know? And then there was a small room that was inside this amphitheater room, so it was like a room within the room. I stepped into this smaller room, and it was the same thing. Everything was bright or white, except for this, like it looked like a hot tub to me. It looked like an old school, those old school fiberglass hot tubs that have all the little contours and all the little shaping for your legs to sit down, and all
Yeah.
these, like, that's what it reminded me of, Jen, but it was not your typical small little hot tub. I mean, it was a pretty big hot tub. Like, you could probably swim around in this thing. And I remember looking at this hot tub, and it was just really weird with and it was black, the same color as I described the seating area. It looked like melted obsidian once again. And I was looking closely at this tub, and I remember thinking, gosh, it's dusty. And the water didn't look very refreshing, and it wasn't really filled up. It had these pockets of little pools of water that were inside this hot tub. It didn't look very refreshing. I remember thinking it looked uncirculated. I didn't want to drink it. Um, it didn't look like it was the cleanest water of anything. And I remember thinking, God, if I'm on a UFO, and once again, I'm questioning, wow, if this is advanced technology that I'm witnessing, the whole UFO thing, um, you would think they would have a housekeeper or something like that. How is it? Why is there dust? I'm
Right. I get it.
why? I was kind of hung up on the like the little things like that. It
Hmm.
was just weird. So that's basically all I can remember from the naturally surfaced memories, I believe, that finally surfaced in my mind. um but the thing is, I kept waking up. So like the next night I would wake up in the same part of this hallway, and then by the second or third night, Jen, I think it was, I told myself in my dream, I was like totally lucid. I go, Mike, you keep dreaming the same area. So I told myself, look, open up this door and you're going to see this and that, right? So I would open up the door, and sure enough, here I am again. I'm in that gigantic amphitheater room. So I tested myself in my dream, and realized that this is where I keep ending up. So to me, that was just like I said, a naturally surfaced memory that popped up. And there's much more to my story. I know there is. It's just a matter of being regressed. Hopefully, I don't even know if I can be regressed. I'm nervous about being regressed. Like, you hear people tell stories about, oh, you know, it's such a suggesting thing. It's a mind wrap warp. It's just like they make you believe stuff that didn't happen. You know how people are, like,
Yeah.
but I'm curious, and I think I'm ready. I'm sitting here telling you that it was a good experience, but I can go run out and get regressed tomorrow, and maybe tomorrow night, if I called you, Jen, I'd probably have a whole nother story to tell you. Maybe I
Right.
maybe I had a very scary and terrifying experience that I didn't appreciate. And the reason why I locked it in my subconscious is because maybe that's just what we do to protect our mind from being fractured.
Oh,
I don't know,
that's a
but
definite thing. Yes, people do
yeah.
that. That's why people, after encounters, whether it's a UFO or Bigfoot or any other traumatizing thing, they'll shut down and they won't talk about it anymore. Some people won't. because they're protecting themselves, you know?
Yeah, it's like, you MK Ultra yourself, your mind cracks, you
Hmm.
develop another character and you
Right.
you move on because, like I said, my mom was a bartender and, I'm not gonna, like totally throw
Mhm.
my mom under the bus here. I love my mom, and when she was sober, she was like the funnest, best friend that I ever had. But unfortunately, she had a lot of drug addictions and alcohol, and the same with my dad. Like they're all gone now, and that's something that I broke the chain of alcohol in my family. At one point in my life, I don't drink. But yeah, it seems like experiencers have a lot on their plate. It's more than just the paranormal, experiencing UFOs, ghosts and things like that. It seems like they have a rough life too. And I've lived in, foster home at times. My mom beat the hell out of me before. She embarrassed me a lot of times when she was on, drugs like PCP. She would lace her marijuana joints with PCP and she would turn into a zombie. She worked at the junior high school that I went to. She was like the don't cut in line lunch lady. She would show up for an hour and work in the cafeteria, and I can just tell just by looking at her that, she was on that drug. To me, she kind of turned into a zombie. She really embarrassed me. She pulled me out of class. She would slap me in front of the students.
Oh, wow.
She would go to the principal and accuse me of having, underage sex with, the girlfriend Jennifer Ashcraft that my first girlfriend that I ever had, Jennifer Ashcraft. I'll never forget. Um, she was so beautiful, and she was a little cheerleader, and I never thought that I could get her. I didn't think I was good enough until one day I had enough courage to ask her out, and all of a sudden she's my girlfriend that I would kiss. I would just give her a peck on, behind PE, on a Friday because we weren't going to see each other Saturday and Sunday. So I would always get a little kiss from her, and that's all we did. But my mom knew that I had this girlfriend, so when she was on drugs, she just thought that like I was escaping my house and having sex. But
Oh, wow.
anyway, I love my mom to death, and like I said, I really don't mean to throw her under the bus. Um, but but it seems like experiencers experience more than just they experience a lot of things, and it seems like there's always a lot going on. I don't know if that's, I don't know if that was your case or not, where there was just a lot more going on than, just the UFO, you
Right.
know.
Um, my case wasn't like that. I mean, I had a lot going on as a single parent, as an adult with, a lot of responsibilities and things like that. But, and it was hard, but, same with my best friend. And all we did was went to the drive-through and lost 2 hours and saw some weird thing over the tree and don't remember a thing. So that's how that was.
To this day, I mean, have you been regressed?
No,
Oh, wow. Okay.
no, and I'm afraid to because
Right.
we were
Yeah.
we were missing 2 hours. Well, actually 2 to 3 hours, but we're sticking with two. But two of my kids said it was more like 3 hours. But um, they remember.
Oh.
They remember from when they were little because they were waiting on us to bring them flaming hot Cheetos
Oh
back.
my gosh. Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you come upon that 2 or 3 hours? But yeah, okay. Wow.
Yeah, they thought we were out lollygagging, going to garage sales and stuff, but that wasn't the case. We literally went to the drive-thru and came right back, and we were gone for like 2 to 3 hours, and we don't remember anything except the car dying in the middle of the road. Um,
Oh.
and then all of a sudden, we were in the neighbor's driveway next to the
Oh
housing.
my God.
Yeah,
See,
eh,
you hear that? It happens a lot when you're driving, and you would think that's so scary, but they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like it's weird. Like sometimes they don't put you right back in the same spot. And I'm so glad, Jen, that they didn't put me in the same spot. I'm glad that they displaced us because that's just like a validation to me that that they took us. It just wasn't some random, hey, look, there's a couple of boys down there. Let's fly over and take a look at them. Like, no, it was calculated, planned. You know what I mean? It had to have been. It
yeah,
really had to have been.
especially with you guys coming out to take a walk at the same time.
And the whole eerie little, meeting each other in the middle of the road. And I mean, I was free to go anywhere in that neighborhood. I didn't have to answer to anybody. And we don't I would walk around that whole neighborhood. I would never talk about let's walk around the block like it was that was such a big thing was let's walk around the block. It was just so like eerie thinking about it now. Like we were just both under the understanding that it's time to walk around the block. It's
I
so
think it's
weird.
cool that you remembered it right away because me and my best friend, we didn't remember for like a couple months.
Oh my gosh.
And she never brought it up, but she remembered at the same time I did, and I happened to bring it up first. And she was like,
Wow.
"Yep, yep, yep." She remembered the whole thing too. Well, what we did remember of it, not we don't remember much, but she remembered that little bit, like we seen something up the tree and hovering above the tree. But it took us a couple months to recall. We didn't remember it all
Wow. So
right
it
away.
wasn't like you just looked at like, like at least I got to look at Chano and go, that was a UFO, huh? And he goes, yeah. I mean, at least we experienced that, and you're saying it took a long time before you even brought it up.
Yeah,
Wow.
like a couple months later. Yeah.
See, it's like you're programmed to not talk about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's just wiped from your mind.
Yeah, and it was really weird, and I don't know. I think it's weird. It freaks me out a little bit. Too, because I'm just like, where were we at? Where
Yeah.
were we? And that's why I won't get hypnotized because, I kind of don't want to know.
You don't want to go back there. Yeah.
Mm-mm. And then I have one more question for you too. Um,
Sure.
when you saw that diner, in your room, the static,
Oh,
diner,
yeah.
the lady, the waitress,
Yeah, the
um,
waitress.
so you said you blacked out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall if you lost time that time too?
So that's all I remember is blacking out. There was no moment where I woke up, or opened my eyes. At least when I had that vortex in the clouds, at least, when I came to there, I was standing beneath a flying saucer that put on a multicolored light show, and I couldn't move. I had paralysis. But in this case, there was nothing to, I don't remember waking up and going, oh boy, that was crazy that what happened last night. You know what I mean?
Right,
I am just completely wiped out, Jen. There was no memory of anything after that other than blacking out. There was no moment where I came to anywhere and was able to look at the clock or if it was light or dark out, like there was nothing to compare anything to, for me to realize that I had missing time, and I was 10.
right,
Yeah, there was no moment where I go, you know what, I think I lost some time there. No, I swear, I didn't even have this conversation with my mom until my adulthood.
right,
Like I said, when I really started looking into the phenomenon and realized there was definitely something to this, that's when I started kind of doing my own little investigation and trying to get any validation I could from my mom. And like I said, she did remember the conversation of me saying, "Hey, can I come sleep with you?" But she does not remember me jumping in the bed with her, which is eerie, which is weird. Like, people are taking from their bed in front of their loved ones, and without their loved ones even knowing or seeing them. It's
right,
like they put people in some kind of they call it like an Oz effect, or some kind of paralysis, where they just kind of, if they're able to manipulate time and space, I believe that's what's going on here. These craft, these people, these beings, whatever they are, they're able to manipulate time and space. So this is nothing to them. This is not a challenge to bring you through the ceiling, to bring you through the wall, to take you from the bed that your loved one is laying right there next to you, and they're not even detecting anything.
right. I've heard of that.
That's easy. That's easy. And this vortex that I seen in the clouds, I run a small private group called Paranormal UFO California, and I've got a few really close friends that are fellow experiencers, and they've seen this vortex as well. So I love, finding commonalities. That's what it's all about. is finding other commonalities from other experiencers, and this vortex that other experiencers experience, it's not always in the clouds, it's sometimes it's in the ceiling of their bedroom. Sometimes they see the vortex in a wall, and as they're being pulled through it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's so many thoughts that run through my mind about this vortex. Like, I do remember it was clockwise. So I remember an experiencer friend of mine one day told me, he asked me, he goes, Mike, do you remember which direction that vortex was funneling? And I go, yeah, as a matter of fact, that's a really good question, but it was going clockwise. And he goes, that it was pulling you in. And if it was going counterclockwise, it would be spitting you out. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
that's what he gathered anyway. And that was Eric Mitchell. They actually did a documentary on him that I was in. It just came out. It's called Experiencer. Yeah. So I've learned so much of the phenomenon, but I am far from a know-it-all. The more you find out, the more the more you want
Right.
to, right? You already know what I'm
I
saying.
do.
So.
The more you
Yeah.
look into it, the
More questions you have.
yeah, exactly. And where can we watch that documentary at?
So it's on Vimeo. I think it's
Uh-huh.
called Vimeo. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It,
And what's your Facebook group called?
it's called Paranormal UFO California.
Okay. So if
It's a
anybody,
small private group. I've only got about like 270 members.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
um, I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I really appreciate you and thank you so much for sharing your encounters, because you never know, somebody else could have had this happen to them, and this could help them, and maybe they could join your group if they did, and that way they can hook up with somebody that's had the same experience, you know what I mean, or something similar to it.
Yeah, I consider it it's a safe space. It really is. And like I said, it's therapeutic to talk about it. And the venue that we just had together, me and you right now, on the phone, it felt old school. And, I'm so used to interviews on, Zoom or whatever. And this was really refreshing. You just sat back and just let me go. I appreciate that so much. This was one of my top interviews. I feel like I was able to really get my point across the way I wanted to. So I really appreciate you. Thank you, Jen.
I appreciate you too, and I'm old school because I'm so technically challenged. I don't know how to do all that other stuff.
Well, I rely on my boys. I got two
Me
adult.
too.
Yeah, they're the ones that help me through this stuff. So yeah.
I'm asking other podcasters, like, please help me. How do you say it? But it's all good. But thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna stop recording now.
Okay,
Okay.
very well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.